Hey guys, today we're going to talk about succession and seres. So we've got to think, how do you get from bare rock to a fully developed forest? From bare sand to a heathland with gorse and shrubs and much more. So how does an ecosystem build itself from absolutely nothing? The answer is succession. But what actually is succession? Succession is the gradual change in an ecosystem over time. It will usually start with nothing, no soil, no plants, just a really harsh environment. The first species to arrive are called pioneer species. These are adapted to live in these extreme conditions. Over time, these species will change the environment, making it more suitable for more plants and more animals. This eventually would lead to a sequence of stages known as serial stages. SERAL stages. So think of succession as a journey. Pioneer stage to intermediate stages and finally to the climax community. You need to make sure you lock into these key concepts, as these are definitions that come up again and again, so make sure you learn them precisely. Okay, so there are 4 different seres you need to know about in geography A level. A lithosere, a hydrosere, a psammosere, and a halosere. So, let's start with the lithosere. Lithosere is basically succession on a bare rock, and at the beginning there's no soil, just the rock. So how does life even start? Well, it's got to start with the pioneer species, and in this case the pioneer species are lichen, and they arrive first. Now they can survive with almost no nutrients, but what they do is they start to break down the rock through a process called weathering. Now this is crucial because it starts to form soil. Therefore, once you've got the soil, mosses will start to grow, then grasses, then shrubs, and eventually the trees. It basically kind of builds in terms of intensity. And over time, the soil depth will increase, the nutrients will increase, and therefore the biodiversity will increase. So this is a classic example of primary succession. Next up, you've got a hydrosere. A hydrosere is basically succession starting in water. So imagine a pond. At first, it's got open water with very little plant life. Then, submerged plants begin to grow. As the plants die and decay, they add sediment to the bottom. This gradually fills in the pond. It's a process which is called infilling. Next, you get reeds and swamp vegetation, then marsh, and eventually dry land with woodlands. So a hydrosere is essentially water turning into land over time. Another example of a sere is a psammosere. Now this is basically succession that happens in sand dune ecosystems. At the start you have embryo dunes, which are basically like baby dunes. These are unstable and very exposed. Then pioneer species begin to develop. Marram grass is a classic pioneer species. It traps sand and stabilises the sand dunes. As the sand dunes grow, conditions become less hostile. Then we get the yellow dunes, followed by the grey dunes, and eventually more complex vegetation like heathland or woodland starts to develop. So the key changes include increasing soil matter, reduced salinity, and greater water retention. The final sere that I'm going to talk through is a halosere. Now this is succession in salty environments like a salt marsh. So it starts with the mudflat, which is generally and regularly flooded by the tide. Then you get your pioneer plants like cordgrass, which can tolerate high salinity. These will then trap sediment, raising the land level. As this continues, flooding becomes less frequent. Salinity therefore decreases, and more plant species will survive. Essentially, you move from a low marsh to a high marsh, and then eventually more stable land. These are the 4 seres you need to know. All the seres follow the same overall pattern. They all move towards a climax community, with increasing biomass, biodiversity, and stability. However, they all differ in their starting points. Is it rock? Is it water? Sand? Or salt? Remember, have faith in yourself and keep revising. And above all, remember to enjoy yourselves. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment.